Communicating over long distances has always been a challenge for humans. One of the first, if not the first method, would have been a visual method of communicating via smoke signals. In ancient China, towers along the Great Wall would use colored smoke to signal the size of an invading army, allowing compounds behind the wall to prepare defenses and marshal forces. Native Americans also used smoke signals, and Lewis and Clark's expedition recorded adopting these methods to signal local tribes of their desire to meet. Torches were also used to communicate messages over distances and date back to the discovery of fire by ancient man. In the mid-1600s, mechanical methods came on the scene using pipes and other physical media to transmit sounds. Examples of these would be the sound tubes, which are still used on ships today, and the kid's toy, a tin can phone, where two cans or cups are suspended by a taut wire or string and transmit sound waves using the cup or can as both the microphone and speaker. In the 1700s, visual methods using flags and torches came onto the scene and were known as visual telegraph. The two most prominent methods used very large flags like semaphores or shutters to block light and transmit a message. In the 19th century, West African talking drums, which mimicked human tonal languages, were used to transmit news of births, ceremonies, and military conflicts over distances of 4 to 5 miles. In the 1840s, we saw the first of several electromagnetic communication systems, starting with the telegraph, and in the 1870s, the telephone. We're going to learn more about the telegraph and the telephone and check out a brand new addition to the collection of the National Scouting Museum in this edition of Artifact of the Week. To get started, let's talk about the telegraph. In 1753, an anonymous author wrote an article about a machine that used one wire for each letter of the alphabet connected to another machine. Messages were sent and received over this wire connection. This was the first of many attempts, but none were ever completed due to inefficiencies, technical issues, or being extremely impractical. In the early 1800s, two European scientists developed an electrochemical telegraph that used up to 36 wires to correspond to nearly every Latin letter and number. Electric pulses on each wire would pass through glass tubes of acid, causing hydrogen bubbles to be released next to the letter or number being sent. In 1816, English inventor Francis Ronalds used static electricity to develop the first truly working model of a telegraph. Electrical impulses were transmitted over wires to revolving dials that displayed the letters and numbers being transmitted. Ronalds offered this new system to the British Admiralty, but it was rejected as being wholly unnecessary. 16 years later, in 1832, Pavel Schilling invented an early needle telegraph. The sender had a keyboard with 16 black and white keys that sent electrical signals over 6 wires to the receiving unit, which used 6 galvanometers with magnetic needles attached to silk wires. 2 additional wires handled the return current and triggered a signal bell when a message was being sent. The combination of the black and white keys on different discs determined what signals were sent to the receiver. In 1837, Samuel Morse and his assistant Alfred Vail developed and patented a recording electrical device that embossed dots and dashes on a strip of moving paper. The dots and dashes were made by a stylus controlled by an electromagnet. On January 11, 1838, Morse sent the first telegram in the United States, a single-letter message over 2 miles near Morristown, New Jersey. In 1844, he sent a telegram 44 miles from the capital in Washington, D.C., to the old Mount Clair Depot in Baltimore. The message Morse sent was, "What hath God wrought?" The Morse system was a single-wire system with the operator tapping out messages on a switch called a telegraph key. Originally, the receiving station would type out the messages sent via Morse code onto a strip of moving paper. Quickly, operators became proficient enough that it was faster to just write the message down as it was being received. In 1851, the Morse system was adopted as the standard for international communications. The Overland Telegraph was completed in 1861, connecting the east and west coasts of the United States and bringing an end to the Pony Express. By 1902, the entire world was connected by telegraph wires and sending and receiving messages. Once the telegraph was invented and had taken hold, the transmission of a voice over an electrical wire was well on its way. Despite the number of people claiming to have been the inventor of the telephone, it was the courts, in adjudicating patent claims and counterclaims, that may have decided who the actual inventor of the telephone really is. Antonio Marcucci was an Italian inventor who in 1856 was able to transmit his voice through wires. He installed a telephone-like device inside his house to connect his ill wife's second-floor bedroom to his laboratory in the basement. In notes he wrote in 1857 about electromagnetic voice transmission, Marcucci says, "It consists of a vibrating diaphragm and a magnet electrified by a spiral wire that wraps around it. The vibrating diaphragm alters the current of the magnet. These alterations of current transmitted to the other end of the wire create analogous vibrations of the receiving diaphragm and reproduce the word." Between 1856 and 1870, Marcucci used his 1856 prototype to develop more than 30 different kinds of telephones. While Marcucci intended to commercialize his invention, he did not have the money to keep his business afloat. His candle factory went bankrupt, and the geopolitical situation in Europe made it impossible for him to raise money from Italian investors. In 1870, his wife sold his drawings and his devices to a second-hand dealer to raise money for the family. Johann Philipp Reis was a German inventor who in 1861 invented a device that captured sound and converted it to electrical impulses, which were then transmitted via electrical wires to another device that transformed these pulses into recognizable sounds similar to the original acoustic source. While Reis considered his invention as a way of transmitting music, he coined the term telephone to describe his device. Reis's telephone consisted of a microphone to capture the sounds and a speaker to reproduce them. The circuit used on his microphone was called a make and break circuit, as the contacts opened and closed. It was believed at the time that intelligible vocal audio was not possible with a make and break circuit. This would play an important role in Alexander Graham Bell's patent application. Reis's microphone and speaker combination could produce musical tones, but it was not really able to produce understandable speech. 1876 was a big year for the telephone. Two names are prominent in the discussion at this time: Alexander Graham Bell and Elijah Gray. This is a story of intrigue, mystery, accusations of theft, and a lack of understanding of U.S. patent laws. Let me set the stage. Alexander Graham Bell was a professor at Boston College and a tutor of deaf children. He experimented with many different transmitters and receivers between 1872 and 1876. These experiments included liquid-based transmitters, and in 1875, Bell received a patent for a primitive fax machine using a liquid transmitter. Elisha Gray was an inventor from Highland Park, Illinois, a community north of Chicago. Gray was a partner in the Western Electric Manufacturing Company, a primary supplier to Western Union, the Telegraph Company. Gray had experimented with and developed a harmonic telegraph device in 1874. It could be used to transmit musical tones but not intelligible speech. On February 14, 1876, Gray filed a patent caveat for instruments for transmitting and receiving vocal sounds telephonically. A patent caveat was similar to a patent application with a description of an invention and drawings, but without examination for patentable subject matter and a requirement for patent claims. Today we would call this a provisional patent application. Gray's filing fee was collected and would be reconciled at the end of the day with other fees that were collected. Later on the same day, Bell's attorney hand-delivered his patent application for the telephone to the U.S. Patent Office. The attorney insisted that Bell's filing fee be immediately recorded in the ledger and that his application be sent directly to an examiner. These actions would essentially make Bell the first to file. This is important because at the time the United States was only one of 3 countries to use the first to invent system to grant patents. In 2013, the United States converted to the first to file system. On February 19th, Bell's patent application was suspended and Gray was given 3 months to submit a formal patent application. Once this was submitted, the Patent Office would determine who was the first to invent by examining both patent claims. This delay also allowed Bell to modify his application to remove any questionable material or prove that he was the first to invent any conflicting claims. Bell's lawyer called Bell back to Washington, D.C. on February 26th, and he met with the patent examiner to discuss the claims in question. The examiner told Bell about Gray's caveat, including a liquid transmitter, and asked for proof that Bell had invented this feature before Gray. Bell's design featured a liquid transmitter using mercury, and to prove he had invented it first, pointed to the patent application he had filed a year earlier for the fax machine that used a liquid transmitter. The examiner accepted this as proof of first to invent, even though the mercury wouldn't work in the telephone application. On February 29th, Bell's attorney submitted an amended application with claims that no longer conflicted with Gray's caveat. On March 3rd, the examiner approved Bell's application, and on March 7th, patent number 174,465 was issued by the U.S. Patent Office to Alexander Graham Bell. But that's not the end of the story. On March 10th, Bell and his assistant Thomas Watson built and tested a liquid transmitter design successfully transmitting clear speech saying, "Mr. Watson, come here, I want to see you." In 1877, Elijah Gray filed a patent application for the design he had previously submitted with his patent caveat, but the Patent Office ruled that his failure to take action previously deprived him of the right to have his invention considered. Undaunted, Gray challenged Bell's patent, believing Bell stole the design from his caveat and illegally amended his patent application. After 2 years of litigation, the court ruled in favor of Bell and the invention was his. Now that we know the story of the development of the telegraph and the telephone, you have to be wondering, how do these apply to an artifact at the National Scouting Museum? In 1934, the BSA started advertising for the official Boy Scout field set made by the American Electric Company of Chicago, Illinois. The field set was a combination telephone and telegraph with an operational range of about 1,000 feet. The kit was advertised in Boys Life magazine as late as September 1937. The field set was patented under U.S. Patent 2,072,264, which was filed for on January 29, 1934, and was awarded on March 3, 1937. In the patent, the field set is described as being inexpensively and ruggedly built to fill the needs for such an assembly by Boy Scout organizations and others having need for inexpensive equipment which may be employed to establish temporary or permanent telephone-telegraph communication between 2 points. Scouts could buy the units individually for $4.75 each or as a set for $9.50. Each unit required 2 D-cell batteries to operate, and the Scout could switch from phone to telegraph or vice versa by flipping a switch. Each unit also came with an operator's manual, which included a Morse code chart. Imagine how much fun something like this would have been while camping or in between 2 Scouts' homes. Well, that's all the time we have for this week. Join us next time as we continue to learn more about the history of the BSA through the collection of the National Scouting Museum and Artifact of the Week.